going on, DOR fam? Today we have an episode of The Drip. Today we're going to be taking a look at the New Balance SC Pacer versus the Adidas Takumi Sen 8. Both of these shoes are new generation 5K, 10K racing flats. As we've moved forward in the racing category and more innovations have come from these companies, we're starting to see more diversification amongst the field. We're no longer seeing too much this shoe could apply from 5K to marathon, although they're starting to specialize much more. And so with the New Balance SC Pacer, we're basically looking at a 5K, 10K shoe with the very soft fuel cell foam that many have come to love. It does feature a carbon fiber plate, also known as what they call Energy Arc. It's got an 8mm drop across the platform. I don't have specifications on the stack height in the heel or the forefoot. In the Adidas Takumi Sen 8, we do have a 6mm drop here with 32mm in the heel, 33mm in the heel, 27mm in the forefoot. Both shoes designed to go fast. We saw Adidas have the live event for the Adios Pro 3 as well as the Takumi Sen 8 for their 5K, 10K half marathon events recently overseas. I just want to do a couple of comparisons, contrasts between the shoes. The SC Pacer does feel like a genuine hybrid between what we would consider a traditional racing flat, very low to the ground, flatter geometry, really snappy at the toe off, and then utilizing some new generation things such as the fuel cell midsole. The shoe, as you can see, there's not really any major bevels, no major toe springs as like the counterpart of the RC Elite 2, very much more rounded, a little bit more stiffer, probably because of the foam as well, and having just more stack height and a little bit more rigidity to the platform. But same goes for the Adios Pro 2. You have more bevel through the heel, more toe spring through the forefoot. Their platforms underneath are pretty similar, but you do have a little bit more outsole coverage along the medial forefoot of the Takumi Sen 8, just to get you a little bit more ground contact, really grippy and pop off that forefoot. Like I said earlier, the geometry of both of these is flatter than their marathon counterparts. This is really meant so that you can load onto that forefoot and explode off of it. In a 5K and 10K, you're doing a lot more pushing of the pace. You're not as rhythmic per se as you would be in the half marathon and marathon. So comparing these two, both foams are very soft. Lightstrike Pro is the proprietary midsole of Adidas. Also really soft and bouncy, and they use the energy rods in the Takumi Sen 8. A little bit more flexibility to this model specifically, but there still maintains a certain aspect of rigidity. They do have a bevel not quite as sharply cut as the Adios Pro 2. Less of a bevel, at least laterally biased on the Pacer here. What I noticed running in both of these shoes, they can both go quite fast and they both live up to the distances that they're designed for. The transitions feel a little bit more natural in the SC Pacer. The transitions are a little bit more fluid throughout. However, you do have a really rigid toe off at the forefoot. So it just kind of feels like that traditional racing flat. Like for me, it feels a lot like the Skechers Go Meb Speed 6. That one had a 4mm drop, but the platform was very similar, and the plastic shank gave it a little bit of rigidity as you transitioned through. Not a lot of major frills as far as like large heel bevel or toe spring, relatively flat geometry and light on the foot. Being at 6.9 ounces, this shoe does feel pretty light on foot. You can really turn over the legs well. I do feel like it might have been a little bit too rigid until I started really picking up the pace. For me, 5K pace is give or take about 441 per mile, 442 per mile. And running at that pace, it felt okay. It felt comfortable enough to race that, especially on the road. But I really didn't notice I was getting a whole lot out of the shoe until I went faster than that, ironically. So for a road mile, when I'm really loading that shoe, I think I can get a lot more pop out of the shoe. And that could be just my foot strike. I might not be as aggressive or loading it quite as hard as some other individuals. But for me, I almost would appreciate just a little bit more flexibility up front. With the Takumi Sen 8, it's the opposite experience. I actually feel like I'm a little bit higher up. It does feel much nicer when I load it, especially at the 5K, 10K type pacing. Protection underfoot feels great. Everything feels nice there. It does feel a little bit more rhythmic than, say, the SC Pacer. This one feels like you can go up to about half marathon, potentially even marathon, where the SC Pacer I feel like would definitely, for me at least, I wouldn't think about taking it beyond half marathon. I think for me, it's definitely 5K, 10K. And if you're able to hack it, you can go half if you really want to. So this one does seem to have a little bit more of a rhythmic sensation to it. However, it's still very poppy, very responsive. It does have the Continental outsole here, like I mentioned earlier, a little bit more grippy, really grabs the road and or track and gets you off of that forefoot. So those are the main differences that I've noticed. I definitely feel a little bit higher up. I can take this a little bit longer distances. Ironically, it does feel a little bit smoother for me at 5K, 10K. I think depending on how the person loads the shoe, they may prefer the SC Pacer. Both great shoes. I like them both. But the Takumi Sen 8 from Adidas is a shoe that I've reached for many times for workouts and something that I just really like putting on my feet. I think one thing to take into account too for the consumer is the fit of the shoe. The New Balance shoe does fit a little bit more normal throughout. You got about a normal heel, normal midfoot, relatively normal to slightly wide for a racing shoe. Forefoot there, I think it does contour around the foot, very thin upper. It does hold a lot of water. I did a workout in the rain in these, and that definitely weighed it down. But overall, the fit's much more forgiving on the SC Pacer. On the Takumi Sen 8, it's very narrow through the midfoot. I'm actually a half size up in these, and it still feels a little bit narrow. Length is like traditional Adidas shoes, a little bit long, but they both have basically minimal uppers, hardly any heel counter on them. Very flexible throughout. So very, very similar shoes, but also very different as well. And I think it's just going to depend on the type of runner for what they prefer. The Takumi Sen 8, I think, does lean towards those who might be a little bit more rhythmic. They like a little bit more flexibility up front, but still want that poppiness and a little bit of rigidity out of the racing shoe. If you really like having a lot of rigidity in your racing shoe, then the SC Pacer could be that option for you. Both relatively flat geometry, both 5K, 10K specialists, and I think they're both great options for those distances. So that's the drip for today. If you like the video, check out doctorsofrunning.com.